All right, let's talk about a word you hear all the time in politics: populism. It's a confusing term, right? And it gets even more complicated when we try to understand what it means in the African context. It's a real puzzle, but today we're going to try and piece it together. Okay, so let's just dive right in. What exactly is African populism? Because honestly, the term gets thrown around to describe so many different, sometimes completely contradictory things. For some people, it's all about xenophobia, targeting foreigners and trying to redefine who belongs and who doesn't. For others, it's about the show. It's about these colorful, over-the-top, attention-grabbing performances on the campaign trail. Leaders who really know how to play to a crowd. And then for some, it's much simpler. It's just about promising people stuff, goods, services, you name it, right before an election to win their votes. So, with all these different ideas floating around, what's the real story here?
Well, to try and get a handle on this puzzle, political scientists basically look at these leaders through three main conceptual lenses. The first lens is all about strategy. Picture this. You have a really charismatic leader who builds a direct personal bond with the masses. They go right to the people, completely bypassing the old school political parties and structures.
Lens number two, it's all about performance. We're talking theatrics, using common, everyday language, sometimes even rough language, to show that you're one of the people. The source material has a great phrase for this: flaunting the low. And the third lens is ideology. And this one is powerful. It's a story, a really simple but effective one, that splits society cleanly in two. You have the good, pure, ordinary people on one side, and the evil, corrupt establishment on the other. Okay, so we've got strategy, performance, and ideology. Now, what's really fascinating is when you use these lenses to see how populism in Africa has actually changed over time. We're going to look at two really distinct periods. First, the military-led people's revolutions back in the 80s, and then this other flavor of populism that popped up with multi-party democracy in the 90s, something called exclusionary populism. So back in the 1980s, you had leaders like Thomas Sankara in Burkina Faso and Jerry Rawlings in Ghana. Now, these guys came to power through military coups, but they framed themselves as saviors, as liberators of the people from a corrupt post-colonial elite, what they called the national bourgeoisie. And these leaders, they had a pretty similar playbook. They built totally new grassroots groups to get around the old system. They were constantly hammering this anti-establishment message. They got the state heavily involved in the economy. They pushed for some really radical social change. And let's be honest, they were often pretty authoritarian. And this story just perfectly captures their style. Sankara famously took the government's entire fleet of fancy Mercedes cars and gave them away in a national lottery. I mean, talk about a statement against elite privilege. But then the 90s roll around, multi-party elections become the norm, and the whole game changes. Suddenly, you have leaders like Robert Mugabe using populist language not to unite all the masses, but to strategically cut certain groups out, whether it was white farmers or city dwellers. The goal wasn't liberation anymore, it was about crushing your opponents. So what are we seeing here? None of these lenses, not strategy, not performance, not ideology, really tells the whole story on its own. And that brings us to the author's big idea, which is really the key takeaway from all this. The most useful way to understand today's populists is what's called a cumulative approach. It's not that they do one of these things, no. They masterfully combine all three. They've got the personalistic strategy, the theatrical performance, and that powerful people versus the elite story all rolled into one. And you can see this combo in action all over the place. Think about leaders like Michael Sata in Zambia, Julius Malema in South Africa, Abdoulaye Wade in Senegal, and Raila Odinga in Kenya. They are perfect examples, operating right in that sweet spot where all three circles overlap. Let's take Zambia's late president, Michael Sata. His nickname was King Cobra, and for good reason. He had this biting wit, a super sharp tongue, and he was an absolute master of political theater. He used it to forge a bond with voters that went way beyond anything his political party could do on its own. And this is where that flaunting the low thing really comes to life. It's all about showing you're one of the people. Sata shows up to court in a speedboat, his party symbol. You've got Malema's party members wearing red berets and domestic worker uniforms right there in Parliament. It's all a performance designed to create this stark visual contrast with the stuffy suit and tie establishment. And here's the kicker. They mash this performance together with that powerful ideology.
Look at what Satsura is saying here. He's directly linking the fight against the government of the day to the historic struggle for independence. He's basically telling the people, this is your next great liberation. So you have to ask, why this specific hybrid type of populism? And why now? Well, it's definitely not happening in a vacuum. It's being fueled by some massive social and economic changes that are sweeping across the continent. A huge piece of the puzzle is what you might call the demand side. Just look at these numbers on youth unemployment in cities. Even though this chart is from a few years back, it shows a staggering and growing problem. You add that to rapid urbanization and widening inequality, and you've got this huge group of frustrated, disillusioned young people in cities who feel totally left behind. And today's populists are experts at tapping into this. Their playbook is pretty clear. They zero in on the problems of the urban poor. They offer up this eclectic grab bag of economic promises, and here's the really clever part. They combine those modern, urban messages with old-school appeals to ethnicity or religion to lock down the crucial rural vote. And through it all, they present themselves as the one and only redeemer of the people. But this all leads to a really big, critical question. If populism is so good at channeling popular anger and winning elections, can it ever be good at governing? Can it build lasting, stable institutions? History seems to show that populist leaders often struggle once they're in power. Their whole style is based on personal loyalty and attacking institutions, which often leads to a new cycle of disillusionment, blurring the lines between the heroes and the villains they once railed against.